Hello everyone, it's Michelle Lupton here today, and I'm going to be showing you some cards that I've made using the new Fall Leaves Hero Arts and Joann kit for October. So we have in this kit the Grateful Pumpkin clear stamp set with the matching frame cuts. We have the Burlap Bold Prints cling stamp. We have a wonderful watercolor dot card from Daniel Smith. We have the clear embossing and watermark ink cube, plus the gold embossing powder and some hero pearls in the colour cork. We also have some cardstock sheets. So the colours are pumpkin, mustard, palm, plum, and sand, but there's also 2 sheets of Luxe White watercolour paper. So this kit is available today and it retails for $32.99 at joann.com, but it has a value of $63, so it's really good value. Alright, so I'm going to be making 3 cards today, but this video I'm going to show you 2 of them. But I started off my card making session by doing a little swatch card of the Daniel Smith watercolors, because as you probably know, when you get watercolors that are solid watercolors like these ones, or even ones that are in a tube, sometimes the color that you see is not exactly the color that it will actually paint as. So it's useful to actually swatch it out onto the cardstock that you're actually going to be using. So I've actually cut this from the watercolor cardstock that is in the kit, and I'm just using a water brush that I had from a previous kit to swatch them out. And I'll just keep this swatch card with this dot card that I've got from Daniel Smith, so that I'll have it as a reference point for next time that I use it. Now, one thing to know about watercolor cardstock is that sometimes it has a bit of texture to it, so quite often you'll need to stamp twice. So it's really useful to have a stamping tool like the Misty, so that you can stamp in whatever ink you are using and then re-ink your stamps and stamp again, so you get a really good impression. Now, the ink that I used for this stamping is the Hero Arts Intensified black ink, because it is, once you've heat set it, it is good for watercolor, so it's safe to use with water. And yeah, so then I die cut out all of my images, and now I'm going to start doing some watercoloring. So I started with the traditional orange color, and I'm just going to show you how I watercolored a couple of these images. With the pumpkins, I tried to concentrate the most intense color closest to the lines on the image, and also closest to the top and the bottom of the image, because I felt that if you were looking at a real pumpkin, that's where the darkest color would be, and you'd get the palest color where the pumpkin's sort of bulging out towards you, if you know what I mean. So you can see I'm adding colour towards the top and colour towards the bottom, but then just using my water brush to sort of drag that colour to the middle to make sure it's a little bit more intense where I want it to be intense. Now, I actually started by doing a wet on dry technique, which means you have water in your water brush and some colour, and you put it to dry paper. But I decided to change my approach, and I actually added water to the watercolor paper and then added the color on top of it, so a wet on wet technique. And I just thought the color moved a little bit more like what I wanted it to move, better that way. Now, I actually went and added some of this sort of reddish brown color to add even more depth towards the top and the bottom of the pumpkin, just to sort of add a little bit of shadow there. And then with this one, I just add a little bit of kind of an olivey green colour to, or a sort of limey green colour really, to the stem. And once I'd added that, I was pretty much done. But you can see I'm just fussing a little bit now. I really should learn from better watercolorists than myself to not overwork with watercoloring. Now what I've got over here is I've just got a baby wipe so that when I change colors with my water brush, I can just brush off the color that's on my brush onto the baby wipe and I'll be ready to go right away with the next color. Now you can see I did not stick to traditional colors with the pumpkins, oh no. But I'm actually sticking to relatively traditional colors with the leaves, although I don't know if purple's a very traditional color for a lot of autumn leaves, but I did have some greens and some oranges and some browns and some reds, so I thought they were sort of traditional autumny colors. Okay, so now with this first card that I'm making, I decided I wanted to use some of the coloured cardstock that's in the kit to create a little diagonal background. So I'm just using some tape runner adhesive to stick these down. I changed my mind about what order I wanted them to go. I always change my mind in the middle of making cards. Anyway, so reorganized all those color stripes and just adhering them right next to each other, butting them up against each other, and adhering them down with some tape runner. And once they are adhered, I just turned the card over and cut off the excess hanging off either side. Now I've just grabbed some of those leaves that I have watercolored and I'm arranging them into a wreath on my cardstock. Now in order to get them stuck down exactly where I wanted to, I'm using a trick that I learnt from the wonderful Jennifer Maguire, using press and seal. So I've just grabbed myself a piece of press and seal and I'm going to lay that down on top of the images, press nice and firmly to pick them up, and then I can add some adhesive onto the back of them. Again, I'm using the same tape adhesive that I used for the stripes, and once they've got adhesive on them, I can just flip that whole lot on top onto the card and press them down and then just gently remove the press and seal, and they're all in exactly the right spot. Brilliant. All right, so I had originally thought that I might actually stamp my sentiment onto a banner and pop it up over this wreath, but I changed my mind once I grabbed the sentiment stamp from the stamp set. I found that the word thanks actually fit perfectly right in the middle of my wreath. So I thought I would just stamp it right in the middle of my wreath, and using the embossing ink and the gold embossing powder, I got a lovely gold sentiment there. Now I wanted to add just a little bit more detail, so I've pulled out these Hero Pearls in cork, which is a great colour to go with the autumnal theme here, and just added a few dots here and there. And once that was done, that's first card done, all ready to go. Okay, so the second card that I'm making, I decided I wanted to use the big background stamp that comes in this kit. This is a really, really useful background stamp if you just want a little bit of texture in your background, nothing too overwhelming. It's a really useful stamp to have. So I've inked up just part of that stamp with the embossing ink cube, and I'm going to be stamping it onto my card base at an angle so that it sort of forms a bit of a triangle coming off into the middle of that card. And once I've done that, I'm going to flip it over and add my gold embossing powder and flick off all the excess, and then use my heat tool to melt that embossing powder, and I have a lovely textural background but also some gorgeous metallic shine from the gold embossing powder. Now once I had heated that up, I grabbed the three of the four pumpkins that I had already watercolored, and I'm just arranging them in a little triangle here, and I'm going to be stamping a sentiment that I'm going to pop over the top of that. I'm just stamping the sentiment again onto the same watercolor cardstock that these pumpkins are stamped onto, and I'm going to cut that sentiment down. I just stamped the sentiment in black ink this time, and I'm just cutting that down, and I put some foam adhesive onto the back of it so I could pop it up. I also put some foam adhesive onto the back of one of the pumpkins, so that would be popped up as well, just to give a little bit more interest to the card. You can see I'm just cutting these foam adhesive squares into rectangles so that it would fit nicely on the back of my sentiment. Again, using tape runner adhesive onto the back of the pumpkins for the purple one, and then for the magenta one. But then I'm putting some foam tape onto the back of the teal one. I don't know what it is. Teal pumpkins just appeals to me. I don't know why. Anyway, so I've got all those foam squares, and some of them I've cut down into triangles or rectangles on the back. I'm going to pop that up onto my card. Now once I've done that, I'm going to put the sentiment on top. Some of the foam on the back of the sentiment was in the wrong place, so I had to take off part of that and just rearrange it so that the sentiment would lay flat. But I kept looking at it thinking, it needs something more. I wasn't quite happy with the card as it was. So what I did was I took the remaining piece of cardstock that I'd actually cut that sentiment out of, and I'm just swiping the embossing ink pad onto that cardstock. And once that's completely covered there, I'm going to, again, add some gold embossing powder. And what I'm going to be doing is creating a matte layer for my sentiment. So I'm going to heat set that. Isn't watching gold embossing powder melt under your heat tool, isn't that just the most magical thing? Oh, it's just so cool. It's so much, I don't know, it's something about the gold that makes it better than all other embossing powders. Anyway, I cut down that bit of gold embossing so that it would be a lovely matte to give a frame around my sentiment, and then I was much happier with that. It just a nice little finishing touch there, and I added more foam tape behind that and popped it onto my card. So there's the second card that I made. Now I did actually make 3 cards, so here's a little sneak peek of the third card, and I have a video on my own channel so that you can have a look at that there if you so desire. But I was really happy that I was managed to get 3 very different looking cards from this kit, but all using the materials within the kit. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you go and check out this kit at Joann's, and we'll see you back again next time. Bye.